Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of No Capes, the show where we talk about creator owned comics with creators who own comics. Joining me this week is Lonnie Nadler, creator of one of my favorite books, Come Into Me, amongst many others. Lonnie, would you like to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi. Thanks for having me, Sean. Um, yeah, I'm a comic book writer. Sometimes I draw them. Mostly known for work I did at Marvel on the X-Men, some Guardians of the Galaxy stuff, and a little bit of Spider-Man. And yeah, creator-owned books. Most recent one is called Black Stars Above, published through Vault Comics, and currently coming a neo-Western noir thriller called Undone by Blood.
I have read the one with Zach Thompson of that from the new series, and I loved it. So that was my first introduction to Undone by Blood. So I'm going to go back and read the whole first lot now because
Damn right you are.
I I'm a stickler for a good. I'm a sucker for a good western, and that was a good western. So yeah, back I go. I'm very keen for that.
Thank you for checking it out. Yeah, the first volume is available now, so second volume just started.
Excellent. To Comixology I go because I don't get a chance to buy many physical comics in Australia because it's expensive.
Yeah, what's the like? Do they just tack extra money on for the import?
A little bit, yeah. It's like there's the exchange rate and everything, so like whatever the cover price is over there, add like $3 or $4.
Ooh, yeah,
It's anywhere between $6 to $10 for a floppy, depending on what floppy it is.
that hurts my heart.
Yeah, so I stopped collecting floppies a long time ago, unless I'm buying like a mini series direct from the creator at a convention.
Yeah,
So I
I don't
mostly
blame you.
buy the trades. So Comixology has been my best friend for the last few years because even the trades are really expensive. Um, like something about the size of the Killing Joke goes for between 50 to $70.
Oh my God.
Last time I looked at a copy of
Yeah,
the Killing Joke, it was $60.
that is absurd, completely.
Yeah, it is, and shipping on comics is ridiculous too. Frankie sent me a copy of Broken Bear, which is here somewhere. It's about as thick as this, anyway,
Yeah.
and it cost him $50 to send it over.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even I buy a lot on Comixology these days. Yeah, like unless you said it's direct from a creator, but yeah, there's no way I'd be buying anything physical
Yeah,
if I
no,
was in your situation.
very rarely. I think actually, one of the last comics I got physical that I didn't get from a convention was, funnily enough, who we were just talking about before we started.
Oh, nice.
As soon as I saw that hardcover for I was like, okay, I'm not backing any
Yeah,
more Kickstarters for 2 months, so I can get that.
so you could get that one. Yeah,
Yeah, because and they're doing one like that for Wailing Blade now too.
I saw that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so
exciting.
I'm really cool that something like that has kicked off, like a new trend in presentation for comics.
Yeah, totally. I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, especially as like the tech becomes more popular and more accessible. And it's no longer just spot foil, spot UV stuff. There's this really cool die cut stuff going now.
Yeah,
It's very interesting to see where that's all going to take things from here. Um, I hope that I'm really glad that it started with small indie publishers and creators, and like not something that like a huge company started. It's really cool to see that kind of innovation coming out of the indie scene.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the heart of the medium, in my opinion, is indie comics. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that kind of self-publishing innovation in the next couple of years.
No, I agree completely. Um, so today we're talking about Coffin Bound, which I hadn't actually read until recently. When you mentioned it, I was like, oh, I've been meaning to read that. This gives me an excuse. And it was almost the complete opposite of what I was expecting from the cover art that I'd seen. Um, but I do generally like Dan's work, and I'm actually really stoked. I haven't scheduled it yet, but Dan has chatted to me about coming on the show for this season sometime, so I'm excited to have
Nice.
Dan come on the show and chat. I'm a little bit behind on my scheduling at the moment because I had a really hectic time over Christmas and the start of the year with the day job, which I am
Yeah.
now back full time creating. So I'm really looking forward to scheduling because, as you know, I reached out to you really early, like November, December last year.
Yeah,
For
I was like, man, on the ball with that.
yeah, I was well,
So far ahead.
exactly. I was like, because last year I got fairly well scheduled, right? But there was some weeks where I was going, oh no, I don't have a creator for this week. I need to get someone. And with my ADHD and stuff like that, it's really easy to not notice until the last minute and go, oh no. So I thought, no, for the second season, I'm going to get out ahead of myself, especially now that I'd had a few episodes out. And I'm just going to talk to
Yeah.
everyone that I wish I could have on the show and go, here's what I'm doing. Would you like to be involved? I'm getting out early. The next season doesn't start till February, so I want to give myself plenty of time to schedule. And within like 2 weeks, I had the entire series worth of yeses.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
And then
so
you don't have to stress about it.
exactly. Now it's just a matter of sitting down next week and finishing the schedule,
Yeah.
which has been great. And some of my favorite people in comics all said yes, and the only ones that didn't is because they're too damn busy. Which when as soon as they've said that, and I've been watching Twitter and I've just seen new book, new book, new book, new book, new book. I'm like, yeah, you don't have time for podcasts.
Yeah.
So I'm always grateful. Like I'm eternally grateful to you, and I'm grateful for every guest that actually takes the time, especially with time differences and zones and all that sort of stuff, to sit down and chat with me. It's a gift and a pleasure.
Yeah, totally. I mean, for me, it's an excuse to not write, so I take those any chance I get.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm just refreshing myself, honestly, with your bibliography on Comixology to see what I hadn't bought yet. And I'm seeing a couple that I haven't bought yet, but I'm also seeing that I'd completely forgotten that you wrote some of my favorite Marvel stuff and my favorite run of Bloodshot. So,
I have to say, I did not touch that Bloodshot. Zach and I were involved in that at the beginning,
yeah.
and we left the project
Oh no.
very early on, and we did not. Our names are just on it as a formality, but we actually didn't write a single thing in that run.
That's a shame. Cuz wait, actually no, this isn't even the run that I thought it was. The Valiant covers for Bloodshot are all very similar, so I actually got it mixed
Very
up with
similar.
the early on like first resurgence of Valiant run.
Yeah, the stuff was that the stuff Lemire did.
Maybe, and that would make sense why I liked it.
Yeah, yeah. His so we were supposed to continue. We were supposed to be doing a prequel to Lemire's run,
Oh, cool.
and then the company went through a bunch of changes and ended
Yeah,
up becoming something else. I won't
yeah.
bore you with it,
No, that's fair. But that
but
would
I
have
just didn't
been
want to take
very
credit
cool.
for something that I didn't do.
No, that's totally fair too. But that would have been really cool. Yeah, cool. I've got a bit of money to spend next week. I'm really looking forward to reading Undone by Blood, and Black Stars Above has been sitting in my wish list for a while, but I've been waiting until I could spare to buy the whole series at once.
Yeah, I think
So
it's read best that way anyway.
yeah,
So
so very keen for that. And
cool.
yeah, Come Into Me was a standout for me um, that entire year. Like every single issue, I was watching and watching and watching for it to come in.
Thank you. Yeah, we're Zach and myself and Peter are all very proud of that, and we're the three of us are making a new book together.
Yes.
That hasn't been announced yet, but expect that next year probably.
Yeah, well, that's you can consider me sold because anytime I see Nadler or Thompson on the end on the title of a book, I'm like, okay, that's a must read. So having both of them on the one cover, yeah, you've got me.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, so do you want to give everyone a rough description of Coffin Bound? Because I'm really not sure how to
Sure, I can
summarize it.
try. Um, yeah, Coffin Bound is about a very strange, somewhat post-apocalyptic world where the protagonist finds out that somebody has a hit on her, a death warrant, and her life is in the hands of this mysterious hitman called the Dirt Eater. And she goes on a journey to attempt to erase herself and her memories and her past, so she can claim her own life before the Dirt Eater can.
Yeah, it was interesting for me. Like when I first finished the read through, I wasn't sure I liked it, which I found strange for myself because I like pretty much all of Dan's other work. But I realized it's not that I didn't like it, but it's had like a really sort of surreal, also sort of abstract way of telling the story and the way everyone speaks. And I think my brain and the way I process info didn't jive with that part of it very well. But the aesthetics, the way the world is built, and just the whole concepts and everything that exists in this world were really friggin' cool.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of like my brain is wired kind of the opposite way, where the way Dan told the story, the way it's written, in the way that Dani did the art, in that it is sort of, it takes a while to become acquainted with the world before you are able to pick up the cadence of the voices and really pick up on the themes that they're exploring. Um, and I had to read the first issue a few times before I got that. But I
Yeah,
love doing that. That's my favorite kind of work, where you don't get it right away and you have to do a bit of work.
exactly. And I think
And
that's what I have to do. I think I need to go back and reread it again because now that I've sat on it for a couple of days, I'm thinking
yeah,
about parts of it that I like more. But at first, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, which is
yeah,
unusual
I
for
think
me.
it's so different from what the typical modern comic is, that for a lot of readers it's a little alienating, but for me that's like exactly the kind of thing I want, where
Yeah,
it's nobody else has made a book like that. It is it is specifically made by Dan and Dani and their collaborators, and yeah, it feels like nothing else, and the more you give yourself over to it, the more it gives back to you. And
exactly.
like, obviously I'm talking about it this way, but I should be clear. Like, I just said to my wife before we started that, like, I reread Coffin Bound before, because like earlier this week and today, because I knew it was coming on here, and I said to her, like, I think this is my favorite comic of the last 20 years. Like, it's the closest to me that we have to, it's the closest I've come to, like, when I initially read classics like Neil Gaiman's early work and stuff like that.
Hmm.
It's the only time I read a modern comic, uh, that I would put in the same category as that kind of stuff.
And that kind of makes sense considering that Dan's been writing Lucifer.
Yes, exactly.
And
And
that's it. I really dig that run of Lucifer.
and Lucifer is another book that, that first issue isn't the easiest to
Oh yeah, it
digest, but it
threw me for a loop,
takes a
but
while.
the
Totally.
visuals of it sucked me in immediately.
Yeah, and I think that's just the kind of writer Dan is, where it's very, it's profound but also accessible on a certain level, and I really admire that about his work. And obviously, Danny's art and Brad's colors are incredible, and Aditya's lettering is like, it all just works together so
It
perfectly.
Yeah,
Like,
it
there's like
really
not a beat
does.
that's missed.
By the end of the book, I found myself wanting to see more and more and more of the Dirt Eater just because his design and his concept was so freaking weird, but the design was so cool.
Yeah, the design work is incredible. I think Danny's quite inspired by Frank Miller, and then like Topi and other European artists, and you just see that it come out in her work, and it's Dan's writing is like no one else is currently working in the same way that no one else is really drawing anything the way that Dani does these days.
Yeah, no, that I get exactly what you mean, and I really loved the visuals of this world. It really did suit, even though I didn't really get the story at first. Like I could follow what was happening, but that sort of avant-garde style of dialogue and the, like you said, the cadence and the patterns and of everything, um, was sort of detaching for me a little bit with my ADHD and just, like I said, the way I process information. But going away and letting it sit for a while, it's sort of filtering in.
Totally. Yeah, and then
Um,
every time you reread it, it's kind of you'll read, some dialogue or captions or whatever, and like, oh, that's what they were getting at there. Oh, I understand that sentence now and how it relates to this other thing in the book. So, yeah, it's an incredibly layered book in that sense.
yeah, exactly. Um, and like the dancers. Hang on, I'm actually going to
Yeah.
start flicking through the book so people can see what we're talking about now. I got so interested in that discussion about the concept behind it that I forgot to start showing people the art. And so, yeah, we've got the first page open here where we're immediately introduced to the vulture and our first character. And there's like mannequin arms strapped to the fence with barbed wire and scattered mannequins scattered all around the yard. It's yeah, it's interesting. Immediately, just like a what the hell is going on sort of scene.
Yeah. Yeah, it has kind of I'm not sure if this was Dan's actual inspiration for it, but there are certain elements of it that have a George Miller-esque feel to it with the especially like Fury Road, just in terms of like how much George Miller packs into a scene. And there's similar things going on in this sort of post-apocalyptic wasteland. I should use caution when I say that, because like I think when people say post-apocalyptic, it like immediately makes people groan sometimes or think of a very certain
Yeah,
specific aesthetic. But this is not like any
no,
of
no,
that
and
stuff.
that's
It's
it.
like its
This
own version of that.
there's post-apocalyptic, and then there's post-apocalyptic. Like there's what most people think of with zombies and mutants and blah 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 blah, and but there are so many different ways.
Yeah, totally. And this is, their own unique way of doing it. But yeah, like you're saying, it's, like mannequins everywhere and just panels packed with stuff. And at first, all of that is just kind of gives off, helps to add to the very strange, weird world that they're creating. But the more you sort of understand about the book, it's like, oh, those things aren't just there for no reason, just for the sake of being weird, but it all goes together to tell a greater story. And like, so whether it's the mannequins or the dancers, the strippers, or yeah, the character of the vulture, like all of them are going towards expressing the themes of
Yeah,
and
I didn't even
what
notice the
we are made
vulture's
up of and
legs
stuff like that.
until just now, actually.
Oh, I don't know if I did either.
He's
What are they?
he's got like little robot mannequin legs.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that now.
Yeah, I
That's what I
hadn't.
mean though. It's like you look at it and it's like there's something new every time.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm gonna be honest. I still didn't quite get the vulture. Like, is the vulture supposed to be God or is the vulture the psychopomp? It sort of felt like it was hinting at both, but I haven't quite passed everything yet.
Yeah, I think especially after the second volume, I think it's like, we're not really going to get an answer as to what exactly the vulture is. But certainly not what you think he is at the start.
Yeah, no, and exactly that. He definitely changes and becomes a lot more than I was expecting, but I still left the end of the book not quite sure whether he was supposed to be like the all-seeing, all-powerful, or if he was just the ferryman, essentially. I still wasn't 100% on that at the end of the book. But I really
Yeah,
loved the character of the Vulture either way.
yeah, and I think that I love that we don't get a concrete answer as to what he is, and yeah, it's like you're saying, it's left pretty open. The first volume, those first 4 issues, his role is like it's not questioned as much. He's just kind of an accompaniment to Izzy, is that her name? The protagonist, her journey, and someone who, yeah, we're just told at the beginning that he's someone who follows death or follows the dying in particular. Um, and so his role is just kind of like you accept it, but then the second volume and the second 4 issues really starts to question what he is, whether he's real, whether he's a part of us or a part of every one of us. And
Yeah.
that's so specific to Dan's writing, that ability to bring in philosophical questions that weren't there previously, and to weave them into the narrative.
Yeah, I've always found that sort of stuff, like the concepts that are raised when I've been reading Dan's books, are really fascinating.
Yeah.
And I love how here, in like 3 pages, we're kind of introduced to the fact that Izzy is pretty cool and she is our protagonist, but almost immediately it's made apparent that she's kind of a fuck up.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
she's a very realized character who,
yeah, like
yeah,
her,
they show her flaws completely.
right? And like her gun is like scattered in pieces around the house and she has to put it back together.
Yeah, I love that. I love the whole the arc of the gun throughout those first 4 issues is so good. And like the way it ties together in the end is just, yeah, perfectly executed. She's just a mess.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go. I wanted to be able to show this page properly. Comixology was being a bit hinky. Where with she's shot that first guy and then she goes out to try to finish them off and the gun just springs apart in the doorway.
Yeah.
So
Is that when she throws the brick at the
yeah.
guy? Yeah.
Yeah, so she just pegs a brick at the guy instead.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I like about the book is there's kind of an expectation in comics in general, and in post-apocalyptic stuff, that you're going to get a certain type of action, but the action that you get in Coffin Bound is it's messy, and it's not like just a typical action scene where they're trading punches tit for tat, but it feels more like, I don't know, grimy and of the world and messy, and
Yeah.
doesn't nothing goes off cleanly.
Yeah, no, and that's it. Like, yeah, everything does kind of just go a bit wrong.
Yeah.
Even when things go right, things are still kind of going sideways.
Yeah, and there's so much setup for that, like the beginning of the second issue, kind of like, it tells you what's going to happen with the prophecy, but by the time it happens, you don't expect it.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. Um, and this first page where we see the Earth Eater, it's really interesting to me because, like, it's not immediately apparent whether it's if it's an otherworldly beast, if it's a mutated person, if it's like a human that's going through some kind of ritual, but it's a really cool design no matter what.
Yeah, totally. I was calling him the Dirt Eater before, the Earth Eater. So, yeah, and that's something that I think the whole world of Coffin Bound offers, is that between, like you're saying, is this supernatural, or is this like a mutant, or is this the result of just the post-apocalyptic world? But I think and I don't want to like put words in Dan's mouth or anything, but I get the sense that it's kind of, you're not really supposed to figure that out. It's just, this is the world that's being presented, and it just is this sort of liminal space between supernatural and real and nightmare and dream and whatever. And all of the characters kind of fit in that weird space. Uh, even like the character with the prophetic eyes and all of the cults,
Mm,
different cults throughout the book and stuff, is they all have supernatural elements to them, but you're just kind of meant to
yeah,
accept them as part of this world.
exactly. Yeah, we're not given a reason for them. There's no explanation to ground them or make them realistic. It's just this is what happens here.
Yes. And that's, kind of why I wanted to talk about this book, because that's my favorite kind of writing. Um, a lot of the speculative fiction writers that I like, um, like Jeff Vandermeer or China Miéville or um, any of these people working in this tradition of, new genre stuff, the new weird or whatever
Yeah,
you want to call it, um, exist in that space where they're pulling things from all different genres and sort of blending it together and just presenting you with this thing that feels both familiar and completely new. Um, and where not everything needs to be explained and not everything needs to have a reason, as long as it fits within the reason of the world itself. Um, and I think comics is a unique space to explore that kind of writing, and Dan is one of the only writers who's been able to not only try it but to pull it off to great effect with Coffin Bound.
yeah, yeah. I know what you mean, and I just had the close up on the screen of it, but I especially love the third panel on the Earth Eater introduction page. The artwork there is just it's something really special to me. I really dig it, like the contrast between the character and that orangey red background, the specific placement of spot blacks. It's busy, but it's not distracting and cluttered.
Yeah, I think, and maybe this is a good time to talk about Dani's art, because a lot of her work is like that. Uh, it, and like you're saying, that contrast, there's such heavy contrast built, and there's a lot of blocks used, but she knows when to hold back and when to go in. So
Yeah,
and yeah, the design of that character is incredible.
it is. It's so interesting. And while we're on the topic, obviously we can't forget letterers and the title work, especially that they've given to each character. I really
Yeah,
love each character's unique like title logo.
yeah. I love that every time there's a caption for the Earth Eater, it says like Earth Eater as like the first line in the caption, but it's also this like introductory, uh, it's like introducing the character. It's
Yeah,
and it's that's like when the lettering becomes part of the design of the page.
yeah, exactly. And
It's
the individual lettering, like not just the logos, the lettering for the story is really uh interesting as well. Like it's got that nice organic sort of feel to it.
Yes. Sorry,
And
my phone is going off.
it's funny that you mentioned that with like the Earth Eater title on each caption box. It sort of makes me feel like one of those schlockies 70s, 80s exploitation sort of type movies where the hero or the villain is walking through and every time they enter a room the theme song plays, but it's just the theme song is just the only words is like shouting their name and then maybe singing something about that character and how cool they are.
Yeah, it's I'd be curious to know like if that was like what Dan's intention was there, because yeah, it has that kind of, like you're saying, that 70s grindhouse feel, but also I could see it being pulled from like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly,
Yeah.
because there's a certain Western vibe to some of the comic.
Yeah, there is
It's
exactly.
but it also at the same time is like it. Yes, it is reminiscent of these things, but it's also feels uh, like I would also be believe completely if Dan was just like, oh no, I just came up with that. You know, I wasn't inspired by anything. It just thought it would be cool to do that. And I wonder like how much like if it was in the script that he wanted Aditya the letterer to like design it that way, or if that was something that Aditya did on his own, or like I'm so curious about the process behind this book.
Yeah,
And because I spoke to Dani late last year, and I know that she said Dan's scripts were quite loose and like often let her just kind of run wild in terms of page design and stuff. And when when Dan wanted something a specific way, he would say it. But often he left a lot up to her. And so I'd be curious to know like how much also control Dan just gave over to lettering and stuff. I can't
yeah.
help but be fascinated about this stuff
No,
as a
I know what you
creator.
mean. If we're lucky, um, it'll be like one of the previous comics I did covered, and the creator will watch the episode later and answer our questions on Twitter.
Yeah, this is all stuff that I'll like when I talk to Dan, I'm like, oh, I love the book, it's so good, but I won't ask questions because I don't want to like, he's a peer of mine. I don't want to
Yeah,
like fanboy or like ask all these questions. But
yep, I know what you mean.
if he has answers for them, I will gladly listen.
Yeah, and that's it. One of the late episodes last year, I cannot remember the name of the book right now, but it was a really cool book exploring like AI and self realization and stuff. And the creator watched the episode, and then a few hours after we finished, was like tweeting us back, answering all of our questions. It was really cool. So, Dan, if you're
That's
watching
awesome.
this, we have questions. And I got to say, I really love Brad's color work on this as well. Um, I,
Yeah,
I really, I always dig when a comic has these sort of supernatural elements or just otherworldly weird stuff happening that they don't go for fully realistic representative colors. And I think that's done really well here. And I just had a look at the issue info and realized why this feels familiar to me, which is that Brad also worked on that MCML XXV, which is also a really out there and cool comic concept, which is I don't think it's finished yet. I've been waiting for the rest of it to come out, so I'm keen to read more of that. And the color work that he does on that is really cool too.
yeah. Brad's incredible. Brad colored Black Stars Above um, for us, and he he was our first choice of colorist, and we approached him because he's so versatile, and he can do whether it's more painterly muted palettes like he did on our book, or like this where it's the color palette goes from like sort of dusty and western to completely neon and more surreal. But that's the mark of a good colorist, is someone who's able to not just adapt but become an integral part of a team. And specifically in Coffin Bound, yeah, that like so for people listening who don't know, it's called local colors when stuff is colored like exactly as it's seen. So just like grass is green, sky is blue, whatever, that's local colors. Non-local colors is what you were saying, where it's like, yeah, the sky can be whatever color, the grass is whatever color, so long as it's evoking whatever mood and tone and atmosphere that the scene demands. And this book is like a masterclass in that, and how it changes colors.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to see like how everyone does their colors from book to book as well. There's just so many different takes and different ways to do things. Um, Trina Farrell is one of my favorite colorists at the moment. I love her like really vibrant, bright color work,
Yeah,
and
yeah. Tree's incredible. She colored an issue of X-Men for us and was just yeah, completely blown away by the
yeah,
talent there.
pretty much anything I see her name on, I'm like, okay, yeah, Trina does good work. I'll read that too, and I'm never bored because everything is just so much to take in on the page. Her work on Crowded and Mechadeck U is some of my favorite.
Yeah, the Mech Cadet colors are yeah, they're pretty amazing.
And I love this the weird guy on the phone.
Yeah, I love that guy. Yeah, I forget his name in the book, but
Um,
that's such a like a great recurring role throughout those first four arcs, the first
yeah,
four issues.
I've forgotten his name
And he
right
just
now
like shows
too,
up.
but
He just shows up like I think once an issue, maybe twice in some issues, and his role is like at first you think he's gonna
Ben.
be like Ben, yeah, you
Yeah,
think he's gonna be an integral part of the plot, and then he's just completely there as like a thematic someone to represent the themes of the book and like the
yeah,
inability to figure out what the self is. And
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was so interesting
yeah.
and
He's
like
gone.
perfectly executed by the end of that fourth issue.
Yeah, right. He's undergoing this weird self-exploratory journey. Spoiler alert! It's time. It's time to give you guys the spoiler alert. If you haven't read the comic, bugger off, read it, and come back because it's yeah, it's just 43 minutes in, so it's okay to get spoilery now. Um, yeah, this guy issue per issue just starts removing parts of himself. Like you can see him here. He's talking about surfaces and how dirty they are and how your fleshy surfaces just get grimy and pussy and sweaty and gross. And then we see him eyeing off the chainsaw on the bench. Like why he just has a chainsaw? I mean, unless he's already been thinking about this for a while, but we're not really told. There's just the chainsaw sitting there. Throughout the course of the book, he just starts chopping bits off of himself until he is just a brain hooked up to some wires floating in some fluid of some sort in his apartment.
Yeah, it's so good. And the setup is that he's supposed to like help Izzy deal with the Earth Eater, like figure out if there's a way to like escape. And he just is absolutely useless because he's so preoccupied, yeah, with his,
Yeah,
his mortal coil, his
right?
flesh, and
And
his
she
body,
calls
and
him her manager.
yeah,
But, like, for what? Other than being a
yeah.
former stripper, I don't know what he's supposed to be her manager for.
I think that's it. I think he
Yeah,
was a manager for the dancers, but his role is so like it's so nebulous, like so much in the book.
yeah. And then, yeah, this whole thing with the dancers, I might skip a couple pages for Twitter terms and Twitch terms and services here.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Um,
Yeah, don't get yourself kicked off of Twitch for
yeah,
for this.
for yeah, and that's it. I've got at some point I'm supposed to be covering Money Shot with someone,
Oh no.
so I gotta sit down and write down some page numbers before we go live.
Yeah, or like download a PDF from Comixology and like you gotta put bars over
Yeah,
everything.
I was thinking maybe for certain pages I'll turn on like a pixel filter that's just the shape of that
Yeah,
page.
yeah.
So yeah, there's a few books that I'd like really love the story of, but then I have to be really careful what pages I show while we're talking about it.
I didn't even think about that. That's so funny.
Um, but yeah, yeah, the dancers in this club at first glance seem like everyday, striptease dancers doing their thing, but they're all wearing these, like the gothy claw rings, except theirs are actually razored, and they just start flaying themselves while they dance on stage, and then wander off upstairs, grab these bandages out of a weird jar full of green stuff, and their flesh starts growing back under the bandages every night. And then I was really confused by that until um the other girl, Taka, I think, um joins up with them and they start talking about the nerve blockers that they use.
Yeah, yeah. I love that first scene with where you see the dancers and they start flaying themselves. I was talking to a friend of mine about this, like, I don't know, this was a few months ago, but he was like, "Yeah, I read that first issue and I just couldn't get behind Coffin Bound because they, there were these dancers and they were flaying themselves, and I was just like, why is this happening? It doesn't make any sense." And I was like, that was a moment of realization for me where I was like, oh, people don't understand this book uh, necessarily the way that I understand it because I've read it several times and love it now. But like, because at first glance, yeah, it's just a weird thing that's happening. But I think that the reality of it is, it's again going toward communicating these themes of what does the self consist of, and they represent sort of the objectivity of the body, and then what is one step beyond like sexual objectivity, and it's like getting at what's beneath the sexuality is just that we're all like, suits of flesh masking organs and blood
Yeah.
and there's that scene where she kind of explains it to the guy who she's like stripping in front of, and it's such an awesome scene. I remember when I first read that, I had to like put the book down to be like, god damn, like Dan is is onto something here.
Yeah, it took me a second. I had to like sort of pause for a second and like take in everything that was being said before I continued on. Because I was like, okay, so this is interesting, but like, what is going on that she can have this conversation while she's dancing, let alone doing this while dancing?
Yeah.
And then later,
Well,
when the process was revealed, I was like, oh, okay, this is making more sense to me now as well. Like,
yes,
the
yeah.
why kind of made sense. I got the concept there, but I was also like, the how? And yeah, it was
But
revealed a few issues later.
and I think that's something that the book excels at, is um this idea of like a lesser writer would throw all these concepts at you and have no thematic or rational reason for them in the world. It would just be weird for the sake of it. But Dan makes sure that every aspect with meeting is full of intent. And there's nothing in the book that I feel like was lazy or just thrown in there for the sake of it. It's everything has a reason, and you might not get it for a couple issues, but it's there.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sort of understanding more now that I've had time to sit on it, and more of it is becoming clear and sort of solidifying as we talk about it for me as well. Which is one of the reasons why I do love doing the show and talking about these books, because I always come away understanding more about the book than I went in with as well.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about getting to talk about comics and having no conventions and stuff for the last year. Uh, it's a necessary thing to have to create a discourse like this, because you might not see what I see and I might not see what you see, and like
Exactly.
having someone else's pair of eyes is essential.
And speaking of pairs of eyes, um, after this scene we get here
Yeah, I'm gonna
where
I'm gonna say that was an intentional segue. I set you up.
um, we've got this scene here where the Earth Eater just demonstrates his power and friggin' buries this jerk in the dirt, and then immediately we come to Cassandra, and he's got the glowing sockets where his eyes used to be, and it's not fully revealed what the deal is there immediately. And it's really tragic when you actually find out what happened.
It's, oh my God, yeah, that reveal where, like, yeah, she's telling the story. There's two versions of the story going, her backstory going on simultaneously, where she's telling one, and the guy who runs, the poet who runs the dance club, is like telling his version, his lying
Yeah.
version of the story. And yeah, it's so tragic when you finally find out what happened.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was reading that, I was just like, "Oh man, no."
And it's also like, you don't necessarily, when you first start reading like issue one, you wouldn't expect this book to go to those places. But it, because the visuals and everything is so strange and bombastic, and then you get these really human, the whole book is extraordinarily human in terms of what it's exploring. But yeah, these scenes and these moments where everything just comes back down to like, you know, to just basic human emotions, and
Yeah,
such an
exactly.
interesting balance.
And yeah, when we get the final reveal as well, like the arsehole is doing his thing and telling his story while Izzy is off on her mission of vengeance on behalf of herself and Cassandra. And then we find out that it was all for naught because of this asshole. That was just like, it was such a knife.
Yeah.
I was like, Cassandra
Yeah.
didn't deserve this. He didn't ask for this.
He certainly gets the short end of the stick, but it's, yeah, again, just that tragedy, and the like multiple viewpoints of it are both equally tragic.
Yeah, and then
I've never
there's
seen a comic do that either, where you get those uh two viewpoints on the same story. You know, I've seen that in movies, like obviously like Rashomon, but I've never seen a comic do anything like that.
yeah, there was another comic I read last year that was doing something similar to that. I can't remember which one it is now. I think I talked about it. I'm going to go back through my previous episodes so I can find out and send you the name of it in case you
Yeah,
haven't read
please
it.
do.
But it was really interesting because there were like 4 or 5, maybe more different story threads occurring simultaneously. And when we got to the convergence point, we realized that every single one of them was influencing the other, unbeknownst to the players in each thread. And it was really friggin' cool.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Please let me know what that is. I want to read that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Right now,
I'm so interested in like the forum of comics, and like structure and issues. And part of the reason I like Coffin Bound so much is because Dan takes his time to make sure each issue has its own structure. Um, Especially in that issue 7 is like just a crazy structure where it like splits into the two timelines. Um, and yeah, that's part of the reason I love the book so much. But any comic that does that, I'm like, you know, that's what I try to do in my work. So like that's what I seek out in other people's work.
yeah, and that's it. There's so many different ways to tell a damn story, and there are so many people all doing their own thing in the indie space that is just fascinating. And over the last year, I've seen more of those sort of indie writers that do these interesting things being brought on for short runs or one shots by the big two. And those are always my favorite hero books because
Totally, yeah.
they take the cape format and do something else with it. Like
Yep.
Immortal Hulk. Holy crap. That I don't know if
Yeah.
you've read that yet, but it's been a fascinating book by taking the Hulk and giving him this eldritch horror weird god body horror mythos, and I love it. You know, like the Hulk is the Hulk is the Hulk for the last 30, 40 years. And then you get to this, and it's like, what?
Yeah, yeah, it's totally rejuvenated the character, and yeah, that's exactly it. Is you get these creators who, they have a unique take on the medium and unique ways to tell stories, and that's what keeps these characters who have been around for 50, 70, 80 years fresh, is new
Exactly.
perspectives on them.
I remember Chris Sabella got a story in the Dark Knight's Metal, the Death Metal storyline. And there was like an anthology book that was released towards the end of last year with a bunch of cool indie creators writing stories. And there was one of my favorite takes on these characters through that whole event. And so I'm really glad that the editors of the big two are starting to notice what these people are doing, because you need that fresh blood and those fresh takes.
Yeah, I mean that's how Zach and myself got into Marvel. Was the editor in chief at the time had read our indie book, The Dregs, and liked it, and just said, "What do you guys want to do?" And
Right?
yeah, they're it's important that they pay attention to it, and I wish more of them would.
Yeah. I
Really,
mean, we got Vita is doing some, is it DC stuff right now? I think was announced.
Vita's doing stuff everywhere.
Yeah, Vita is very prolific, and Vita's work is amazing. But yeah, I was very excited to see. I think actually Vita announced both some Marvel and DC stuff recently, which I'm really excited to read that, because I'm getting so bored over the same old writers that have been writing for the last 30 years that
Mhm.
when I'm seeing Marvel books pop up from this indie space, I'm like, yes, I'll buy that one.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I only buy stuff based on creators now.
Yeah,
Like I used to be the kind of comic book I grew up with comics, so I would buy Batman no matter who was
yeah,
writing it or working on it. I would buy Spider-Man, I would buy the X-Men because whoever was work because of the characters. But now it's just like I won't buy those unless I like the creators.
same. I stopped reading Red Hood because of that.
Yeah.
There was some real unpleasantness involving the writer of the Red Hood last year, and I was like, okay, so that's off my list, and these six other titles are off my list.
Yeah.
But you know, when somebody else finally takes over, I'll probably start reading it again, especially if it's some of the folks that have been writing, like the Nightwing books have been really great lately. Um, if it's some of those sort of folks writing those, or some of the people doing like the X titles at the moment are all really good.
Yeah.
And if they get a
And
chance to write those, then I'll read those again.
totally. And that's, with it's interesting with Coffin Bound because it's an image book, so it's obviously like fairly high profile, but Dan was working on Lucifer before that, and Lucifer's a big title, and
It
it was like
is.
he
Yeah.
got brought onto that fairly early, and I think he did some DC, a little bit of DC stuff last year, or that just came out or whatever, part of their. I don't remember what the initiative was, but it was a one shot. I think that was part of that.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know
But
the one you mean.
him and his White Noise crew, like Rom is doing so much stuff at DC now, and Alex Packnadel is doing Immortal Hulk one shot over at Marvel, and so it's cool to see those guys who really deserve it getting more and more credit. Um, but at the same time, it's like I love their creator-owned stuff, the stuff that is fully just
Yeah.
the stories they love and they
Yep.
want to tell. And um, even
Exactly.
Dani too. I don't think she'd done uh, a North American comic before Coffin Bound, and now I think she also got announced on something at DC recently.
Yeah, and that's it. I've like, there are some DC titles coming out that I'm going to pick up because of the independent creators involved in them. But overall, I'm kind of off DC at the moment, because of this whole NFT thing that's going on.
Are they doing NFTs?
Yeah. They announced an
What?
NFT program last week or the week before. And
Sorry,
they're going to be
I didn't
cracking
know
down
about
on
that.
what creators can and can't do commission art and fan art of because of this as well.
That's that's madness.
It
I'm
is.
sorry.
It's really
Can't
strange,
help but laugh at that.
right?
What an
But
absurd time we live in.
it
People need to
really
go
is.
outside.
It really
People
is.
need to get out more. Oh man, that's madness.
uh, yeah. I could tell you one book that I'm really excited for, and I don't even know what the bloody title of it is, though, is the Sebastian Perez and Ryan Lindsay book that they've been teasing about.
Yes. Yeah,
I
the heavy metal book, right?
I think so, yeah. I had Sebastian on the show last episode, and he said they're working on something. They've been working on something, but they're also working on something new
Oh, cool.
that hasn't been announced yet. And
That's very exciting.
it's going to be really weird and interesting and exciting. They obviously couldn't tell me too much, but it sounds really cool, and I like both their work, so I'm really keen.
Yeah, I will definitely be whatever it is, I will buy it.
Yeah, and Dani, Were Dogs, all the books that they announced at like the last quarter of last year. I'm very excited for those.
Yeah, Dani, sorry, they're on fire. Like just announcing new book after new book. It's really exciting to see.
Yeah, no, it's great, and that's I'm really keen to read all of those and just talk the crap out of them when I can on the show.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that takes us to almost an hour. So, what have you got going on at the moment yourself, and where can people find it?
So I guess the most recent stuff that's worth picking up is Black Stars Above. Like I said, the trade was collected last year, so that's available and making the rounds. And then currently coming out is the second arc of Undone by Blood, which I mentioned earlier. And the second arc is like a completely new story, so you don't have to have read the first arc at all. You should, but it's not necessary if you want to pick up the single issues. So the first issue of Undone by Blood, or The Other Side of Eden, just came out a few weeks ago, and the second issue comes out in a couple of weeks.
Excellent.
And
That's good
other
enough.
than
That's enough
that,
time for me to catch up.
yeah, exactly. And I've got a lot of projects on the go. I'm doing a bunch of video game writing that I can't talk about yet. And I have a graphic novel that has been a very slow process because it's a long book, and I've been working on it for 2.5 years at this point,
Very cool.
and it should hopefully come out next year. Hasn't been announced, but it's got a publisher and everything. And another book that has not been announced that I'm doing with Aftershock, uh, which will be probably come out before the graphic novel, and it's a very weird sci-fi, um, heavy sci-fi book. So look out
That
for that.
sounds right up my alley. Very keen for that. Um, if any of that video game stuff you're working on and ends up being on the Switch, please let me know, because that's the only
It
console I
it
have.
it 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 will. Yes, it will be on Switch.
Excellent. Yeah, I it's the only console I have, and I don't put video games on the computer I'm using for the show because it's my work PC, and I refuse to let
Smart.
myself go down that rabbit
That's,
hole.
yeah, that's very smart. I don't
um,
have that self-control.
yeah, but yeah, I'm very keen to, like, obviously, as I said, I've enjoyed your comics, so I'd be very keen to try something interactive that you've written. That'll be a really interesting experience.
Yeah, it's something no one is going to expect from me, so it'll be interesting when it gets announced.
Sounds great. Um, if you ever want to dip your toes into RPGs, feel free to send me a message. I'm not an expert, but I have written a few adventures now. As I mentioned, I am working on some stuff with some other creators at the moment. And I'm always super, super happy to chat RPGs with people. So if you ever want to write some D&D adventures or something like that, hit me up. I will
Cool, yeah.
yarn for hours.
Sounds fun.
Um,
Awesome.
yeah, for anyone that hasn't been here before, No Capes happens every week. Um, except when something random happens and I have a crazy chaotic thing like my computer crashing 2 weeks ago. So had to postpone that. Every week, 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Time, which is around the 7 or 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time mark, depending on whether you're in daylight savings or not. The Shifting Spire is my monthly D&D actual play competitive show that happens once a month. I am going to be preparing and releasing the full schedule for that next week because the time changes. It's almost always the second last Saturday of the month, but the time changes depending on what time zone my players are in so that they can be comfortable. I've got some new shows coming out. I'm going to be collaborating on a new show with Split the Party soon, and I'll be releasing for free sometime soon The Man Who Found the Future, which is the mini comic that I mentioned I'm working on with Ryan Lindsay. I'll shoot Ryan a message and see how we want to release that, but obviously it'll be a free to read thing. And hopefully by the end of this year, I will have some announcements about The Network Man, which is the weird sci-fi anthology that I'm putting together with some other creators at the moment. I decided instead of trying to write anything big, I'd just do a cool world-building anthology thing where other writers can come in and I'll just give them the book, like the keys to the sandbox. Like, here's the world and the rules of the world. Write whatever you want. And I'm going to write a story and I'm going to draw one of the stories and we'll team up with some different artists and stuff. But it's going to be like a weird, schlocky 70s aesthetic spy story. But it's not the 70s. The world just hasn't advanced past the 70s aesthetic. So it's like a near future advanced tech society that still looks like a 70s spy movie.
Nice. That sounds amazing.
It should be really fun, and I thought that would be something more feasible and achievable for my first proper project. I've got a graphic novel as well, like you mentioned, that's been in the works for a really long time, but I realized, like, I need to learn how to draw this, and this, and I need to learn how to actually write a goddamn comic before I write this. So, this has been No Capes. This has been Lonnie Nadler. I have been Sean Sunday. Please check out Season 1 and the first few episodes of Season 2. The rest will be up next week. I haven't finished editing them yet because of the said computer crash. On YouTube. And come back next week when I talk with Minerva Fox about Broken Bear by Frankie White. So, for now, thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you want to. Follow the channel. Share this VOD around. Let people know about the show. Come and find me on Twitter and chat to me. Suggest comics that you think we should talk about. Hang out in my Discord if you want to come and learn more about what books are coming out and what projects we've got going on. I'm just going to link that in the chat for everyone. You can get involved with one-shot games that I'm running and all that kind of stuff in the Discord. Go follow Lonnie, and here is Lonnie's Twitter for you. Until then, we'll see you next week. Thank you very much for your time today, Lonnie.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No worries. Thanks everyone for watching. Until next time. Bye-bye.